Good morning and welcome to The Week in Politics. My name is Dr. Laine Dare and I'm the Director of the Institute for Governance and Policy Analysis here at the University of Canberra, and of course I'm welcomed by our very own Michelle Grattan. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Laine.
It's been yet another big week, Michelle. There's been a lot going on and I'm sure we've got a lot of commentary here from you today about some really important things for all Australians. On Monday, women all across the nation marched in the name of justice and equality. The same day, Christian Porter filed defamation proceedings against the ABC, accusing them of defaming him by publishing an article which detailed historic allegations of rape against an unnamed minister, later revealed to be Porter, who came forward to deny these allegations. In Parliament, the focus was on industrial relations, with a heavily scaled-back version of the government's omnibus bill passing through the Senate. Now, Michelle, let's start with the approximate 5,000 people who attended Parliament House's front lawns to protest against the treatment of women in this country. How did the government respond?
Well, I think not very well. Firstly, Scott Morrison wouldn't meet the demonstrators on their own ground at the demonstration, and neither would the Minister for Women, Marise Payne, and I think it was certainly a mistake not to send Marise Payne out. So that was one thing. The Prime Minister did invite a delegation into his office. The women considered this but refused to go down that path. And then Scott Morrison gave a speech in Parliament where he was trying to say, well, it's a good thing, a great thing that we have the ability to demonstrate, to protest in this country. But he then said in other cases, in other countries, protests are met with bullets. Now, at one level, the point was obvious and you could not take exception to it, but at another level it just jarred and seemed out of context and not the right note to strike. So that immediately got a lot of criticism. And more generally, I think, the perception was that Scott Morrison was not really in tune with what was going on, was not able to empathise enough with the mood of women seeking justice, seeking equality.
Michelle, on that same day, Attorney General Christian Porter filed a claim against the ABC, suing for damages following defamation. Is there a conflict of interest in the Attorney General, the highest legal officer in the nation, suing a government institution in a court that he has oversight of?
Well, this is a very messy situation, and what we saw was that Christian Porter is determined to fight back, to attempt to clear his name, and remember he's strongly denied this allegation of historical rape. And he's now saying that he'll be back at work at the end of the month. Now, his job of Attorney General, of course, covers a wide area, and certain parts of that job are having to be carved out and given to the minister, the more junior minister in the portfolio, or others, and that is going to be quite a difficult situation, I think. Also, of course, he was missing this week when he would normally have been doing the negotiations on the industrial relations legislation, because he's also industrial relations minister. So I think the fact that he is continuing his job and this defamation case will now proceed does make for complexities. The actual conflicts of interest can probably be dealt with in a sort of direct way, but more generally, I think that having him continue on is complex for the government and difficult.
Another complexity that the government is facing is the scrutiny over the vaccine rollout. So the government's booking website crashed this week, just as they opened it to the next rollout phase. This timing is really problematic And as we move into this next phase, phase 1B, we will see the vaccination of these vulnerable groups, emergency workers, and those people aged over 70. Based on what we've seen so far, will the rollout be hitchless?
Well, I think it's going to be bumpy, and we are, as you say, moving into this next phase where there are a lot of people. And what the government did was really sort of hype up that it was about to go into this mass stage before things were quite ready. Now, we may be only talking about days or a couple of weeks or whatever, but nevertheless, of course, people, when they heard that this new stage was being reached, rang up their GPs. The GPs said, no, we can't book anything yet, we don't have the vaccines yet, and so there was a bit of general chaos and griping by the public, by the doctors, and the government was having to appeal to people to be patient, and indeed one of the medical officers yesterday was even appealing to people to be polite when they rang up and got a receptionist. So obviously the feedback is that people have been pretty annoyed. I think the vaccination program will in the end go reasonably well, but at the moment we're having great trouble getting supplies from abroad because of course the Europeans are clamping down and saying we need the vaccine and we're not going to allow it all to be exported. But the Australian production of the vaccine will be starting very, very soon, and I think that will relieve things.
So keeping on the topic of COVID, the government has announced plans to support Papua New Guinea, where a pandemic is taking alarming hold. The government is gifting 8,000 vaccinations, medical equipment and a team of health scientists. They're also helping to secure additional vaccinations en masse for Papua New Guinea. Obviously, Australia wants to help our nearest neighbour, but does Australia run some risk itself if the Papua New Guinea pandemic gets out of control?
Well, yes, it does, because there's a very porous border between Australia and PNG in the Torres Strait area. People come and go all the time. It's sort of one community on both sides of that sea area. So if that area isn't protected enough, and there are efforts at the moment to get people vaccinated there quickly, then it could be very troublesome. And also people are coming in, flying into Brisbane from PNG. Now the flights have now been halted for some time, but they have been coming in and they have been testing positive. So they're in quarantine, but it can seep out, obviously. So there are dangers, and I think there are a lot of fears in Queensland about this. But looking at the PNG situation from their point of view, I mean, it is terrible what is unfolding there, and it's a health system which is of course much worse than our health system. So the need to give aid to PNG is very, very great. The problem is what I mentioned before about the Europeans not allowing the supplies to come in as they should. We want to give part of our vaccines from overseas. This is separate from that emergency 8,000. We want to give 1 million of our vaccines, which have been put aside for countries in the region by Australia, to PNG, but at the moment we haven't been able to get hold of them. Now the government has said that it will make urgent representations and has started to do this to the Europeans, to the vaccine producers, and we'll see in the next few days how they respond.
Michelle, let's move now on to industrial relations. Yesterday afternoon, the government's industrial relations bill passed through the Senate, but it was a very different form to what it was in the morning. The bill was supposed to be the culmination of months of consultation between the government, industry groups and the unions. But by the time it gained a majority vote, it was a shadow of its former self. What does the bill accomplish now, and what was it supposed to do originally?
Well, it doesn't accomplish all that much. It does make some changes in relation to casual workers, and I think they're being welcomed by business. But of course it was supposed to put much more flexibility into enterprise bargaining, and it doesn't do that. It doesn't go to the award system, which again, reforms were proposed there. And of course the government had already thrown out its major change to the BOOT test, the Better Off Overall test, some time ago to try to get One Nation support for other parts of the legislation. So in general, we've got a very, very slimmed down result after all that work, as you mentioned, all those negotiations, and not even the provisions on wage theft got through because the government pulled that at the last moment because the trade-offs were not there. So, bit of a farce overall.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for this week in politics. And it's been lovely to talk to you today with our beautiful surrounds here at the University of Canberra. A little bit different to where we normally talk, but it's nice to have some fresh natural light as well.
Indeed. Thank you, Laine.
See you next week.